Morning, Albert.
Yay.
How you feeling?
Pretty good.
Oh, it sounded like you had like a.
No, probably. I don't know.
You don't care otherwise. Yeah, I'm gonna do it. Good. I left my hat. Yeah, I left my hat.
So when I'll begin. right, I think we'll start. A couple of announcements. I'm all caught up in my marking. If you handed in something and you didn't get a mark back, let me know. Sometimes Blackboard is funny that way. So just let me know if there's something I missed. Second announcement, for those of you who won Kahoot last week and are expecting stickers, I finally got them. They are right here. Come and claim the stickers. First place gets 3, second place gets 2, third place gets 1. They're all new, all different. Yes, I know. It's such a difficult decision.
This is the whole batch.
Well, I bought 3 different packs. This is pack 1.
Oh.
Yeah, maybe next week I'll try pack 2 or something.
That's a little Linux boy. I don't know.
So come claim your stickers if you need one. Third announcement, I updated the syllabus yet again. So this week's class, I'm actually combining 2 classes. Last year, I taught this class called CSS Transition, and then I taught another class called Sprite Animation. I decided to combine the 2 for this class. I think it just flows better. And so we'll see. It might leave us room to do other things. It'll give us an extra class, so to speak, so I can do perhaps other things. Any questions or comments before we get started? Again, please try to aim to hand in your exercises every week, even though the hard due date is on February 19th. That way you're not, trying to rush. Okay. All right, so every week I'm going to show this map of the world of web animation just to keep a mind map of where we are. We started with CSS transforms with a hint of transitions to make it smooth last week. But this week, today, we're going to focus mainly on the transitions part. So last week, I taught you, to make it smooth, put transition of 2 seconds. But you know what? There's actually more properties and more. We'll get into more in depth of this transition property. So that's what we'll learn today. So to do today, we are going to learn all of the transition syntax. So define precisely what visual properties will be transitioned. We will configure a simple CSS transition for an HTML element. We will also set up multiple properties to be transitioned using CSS shorthand syntax. Number 2, we are going to take a look at the whole concept of timing, where you're talking about the ease in, ease out, or to make your own custom timings, otherwise known as cubic Bezier. This is where you can control animation timing for the transition properties. Number 3, this is where I'm doing something new for this class. I'm going to combine 2 classes in one. I'm going to talk about using the steps function within transition to make sprite animation work. And finally, number 4, actually, forget number 4. I put that in and I wanted to delete that. Okay. So CSS transition. This, as you experienced last week, it describes how a property should display the change when given a different value. The way I like to think of it when I first learned about transition is there's 3 things involved in transitions: when to move something, what to change, how to change it. And basically it's like this. When to move, that involves the trigger. So once the trigger happens, what to change, that's when you're defining which specific animatable property gets to move or whatnot. And then how to change it, that's where the transition is involved. So last week, I said, you know what, to make all your transforms smooth, use this. And I pointed out transition of 2 seconds. What I didn't tell you is what that really means under the hood is this. Transition all 2 seconds ease. So by default, if you do not specify a specific property in your transition, then the property will be all. Basically, the browser is looking for all the properties like transform, like background color, like margin, like whatever, top left. It's looking at all the properties, and it'll animate all that in 2 seconds with the timing of ease. What I didn't tell you again is that this is just the shorthand of this. Just like other CSS properties, like background has background color, background image, whatever. you have different properties such as transition property, transition duration, transition timing function. So in reality, when I told you transition is 2 seconds, it really means all of these three. Okay, so that's what we're getting into today. Let's see, what else do I have here? Here's what I taught you last week, where you basically say transition 2 seconds, or here it's transition all 1 second. Yes, you can say transition all, which basically forces the browser to watch for any property change at all. But here's my question to you. Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing in terms of performance for the browser? So basically, if you're forcing the browser to watch for all the properties to anticipate it animating, the answer is it's a bad thing in terms of production. You never really want to use all. You always want to be more specific. For learning purposes, like we did last week, it's okay. But in terms of production, you never want to do that. So I'm going to give you 2 use cases of why it's bad. And here's a CodePen example. Sometimes you may unintentionally affect future changes. So let me open up this CodePen to show you an example. Here I have a cat's paw moving the ball. Okay. In my animation, though, I actually say somewhere. Oh, where did it go? Here, this one. Number 1. Notice we used all here. So transition all 1,000 milliseconds, which is 1 second. Ease out 200 milliseconds. Okay, but let's say another programmer comes along, or perhaps it's yourself in the future and you forgot what you previously did, and you wanted to add another property like this. I'm going to uncomment this line right here. So here, I'm going to transition so that it'll have a border by the end of the animation. So now what happens, watch what happens if I click the paw. I wanted a border, but notice how, you see what happened? The border is affected by the animation of transition all, which was not my intention. So this is an example of, or one use case scenario, why you do not want to use transition all, because you don't want future code to be affected by transition all. So that's why instead of transition all, you want to be more specific. In this case, how do you be more specific? Well, you look at what you're transforming. I'm using transform here. I'm using background color here. I'm using border here. So I have to put all 3 in here using multiple transforms, which we'll learn later. Okay, so that's to help the browser be more performant. Second use case scenario. So Rachel Nabor says this: transition property all is not very performant. Don't do it. It does not let the browser optimize for things that might change, and that might result in the browser devoting too many resources. That's basically earlier. And finally, the second use case scenario is if you use transition all, you've probably experienced something called jank. Who here has heard of jank? Jank, yeah. So it's basically the animation is supposed to happen on screen, but it looks way jerky. It's as if the computer processing power is not fast enough to keep up, and that's what happened. That's what may be happening if you're using transition all. All right, so we're going to delve into each of the 4 different properties for transition. Again, when I taught you last week to use transition 2 seconds, that was the shorthand, and that was using some defaults. Now we're going to go into each property more in depth. The first one is called transition property. So this is the property that you want to change. Again, do not use all. You want to be more specific. So here's, again, a link. I put a link here of see all the animatable properties. Right, so here is what you want to write inside the transition statement. So instead of saying transition all, you would want to say transition border right, or transition opacity, or is the transform, transition transform, or transition, another common one is opacity, or transition filter, you know? So these are the words, the specific words that you want to write when using transition property. So you're basically, again, informing the browser what property to look out for, and that will make the browser more performant. Again, don't use the all because that is not as performant. You want to be more specific. And so let's check out this CodePen example here. So here, I just added a little bit of JavaScript to make this circle animate. By the way, let me see here. Do I have? This could be the basis for your assignment number 1 for the toggle, right? Because this kind of looks like a switch. You just have to put like a border around it or something. That could be, the code here could be the basis for that if you choose to go this route. So let's check this out here. What did I say here? I said here I'm using what I taught you last week. So transition of 2 seconds, which again is not very performant. So you have to ask yourself, what is the specific property that I'm changing? Answer this one here. So this is the class that's being added whenever I click. And so there's 2 properties. There's transform property and there's background color property. So in reality, what I want to say is transition transform 2 seconds, for example. That's being more specific with the transition property. Or if we want to do that's the shorthand. If I want to do the longhand, then transition property colon transform semicolon transition duration 2 seconds. That just takes care of the transform. We'll get into how to do multiple properties in a second. Let's see. Yeah, question. Yeah. What's making it go back in the beginning in? So what's happening is if I click on this, it's adding or toggling, it's adding the class of move. What is the class of move? The class of move translates it 100 pixels to the right. So that's why it goes that way. But if I click it again, because I'm using the keyword toggle, it now acts as a remove. So it's remove this class. So then it goes back. However, what makes it smooth is really the transition here, right? If I didn't have this transition, let me comment this out. Comment out. What happens? Jerk, jerk. Those are called jump cuts. That's just a regular transform with no smoothing, right? Let's see here. So that is transition property. Next one is transition duration. Okay, last week I said 2 seconds. The value can actually be seconds or milliseconds, right? So in this case, you have 3 seconds or 3,000 milliseconds. Apparently, in production code, professional animators like Val says milliseconds is used the most in production out in the workforce because it's more robust and it's just used a lot. Though milliseconds, oh yeah, I just said that. However, there's a magic number when using this transition duration, and through research, people have discovered there's a sweet spot for animating, and I've demonstrated that here in these 3 values. So sometimes an animation can feel too fast, and if that's the case, that's a bad thing because maybe the cognitive load benefits are lost. Okay, so here's what the research has found. If your animation happens between 0 milliseconds and 100 milliseconds, you might as well put nothing at all. It's just as jerky. Okay. Actually, we can experiment with that. Let's try that out with the ball here. Try that again. So instead of 2 seconds, I'm going to say maybe 50 milliseconds, right? Let's try that out. See how jerky that is? Might as well, so it's suggested, might as well not put anything else at all. Sweet spot, however, is this, between 100 milliseconds and 1 second, that's your sweet spot. In particular, within that is this magic number of between 250 to 300 milliseconds. That is known as the animation sweet spot. Apparently, a lot of gaming programmers use that number a lot. So let's try that. Let's go to here. Let's put in 250 milliseconds. See what that looks like. However, if your animation is between 1 second and 10 seconds, your user will feel disconnected. And so if you ever need an animation that needs to take that long, perhaps you need a play button. Let's see here. Well, let's try that out. So let's say try 5,000. That just seems a little slow. That's the second property. The third property is called transition timing function. Again, when I said to you last week to use transition 2 seconds, by default, it is using a transition timing function of ease. So what this property is, it's an optional property that basically cushions the transitions. Again, the default is set to ease. We'll get into more in-depth of this in the next slide. But basically, examples of this are ease in, ease out, linear, or you can make your own, or steps, and we'll get into that in a second. Oh, hold on. Did I have a link here? No, I did not. Okay. So here is the next slide, easing. So easing is also known as the cushioning in studio animation. It describes the animation's rate of change over time. So who remembers back in week 1, 12 principles of animation, what does this remind, which principle of animation does this remind you of? Remember the slow in, slow out? That's it, okay? So in this example of the little diagram here, this is an example of an ease out, meaning to say, let's pretend this is Dash, right, from the movie. The Dash is speeding along right here, and he's slowing down near the end. Right? So the illusion is he's moving fast here because there's less frames here, but then he slows down here. So the way I like to think of it is an ease out is like you can substitute the word slow in there. So slow out meaning to say at the end or the out, that's where it slows down. So whereas acceleration is ease in. Here are some of the preset values. So you have linear. Right? This makes things look mechanical. However, nothing in the real world moves mechanical. That's why people use the other functions. You have the ease in, which is the acceleration, the ease out, which is the deceleration, ease in and out, which is a combination of both. So it starts off a little bit slow, goes really fast in the middle, then slows down at the end. Steps, which is responsible for sprite animation, which we'll get into later on in this today. And finally, this one here, cubic Bezier. This is where you make your custom functions. I put 3 tools here, 3 websites that may help you. So the first one I want to introduce you is this one here called easings.net. I think I mentioned this in the announcements. So if you hover over some of these charts, it basically gives you a red indicator that shows you how the transition will occur. Here's a question for you. Remember that website here, treefrog.ca, where this rocket, if I hover over the rocket, look at the transition. So it starts off very slow, then really accelerates, right? It's not linear. So which of these graphs do you think resembles that rocket ship? What do you think? It has to start off slow and then explodes. Yeah. Left side, yeah. Which one? Third one down? Yeah, this could be it. Yeah. Maybe this one. No. Now this one here, this is kind of cool. It kind of bounces as it goes there. And I do notice that there is a bounce. Watch. When I let go, there is a bounce where the rocket ship actually goes below the button. So that, you know, that's using a cubic Bezier. That's not one of the regular ease in, ease out curves. Okay. Okay. So there's another, that was the first link. The other link I want to show you is this one here, CSS3 BradshawEnterprises.com transitions. Let's take a look at that. What I like about this web page is this little different timing functions chart right here. So watch what happens when I hover over this area and see all the different boxes move. Now keep in mind, they're all starting at the same time and they're all ending at the same time. The only difference is the curve. And that's what makes your animations look more lifelike. Here we go. Hover. All right. So as you can see, let's take a look at the default, ease. So it just, you know, gradually speeds up, slows down kind of thing. Which one is faster in terms of reaching its, in terms of accelerating? Ease, this one here, ease in or ease out? Let's take a look. Ready? Ease out, obviously. Now they end at the same time, but ease out accelerates faster at first, whereas ease in is the opposite. This one here, custom and awesome, that's using cubic Beziers. And if you look at the awesome one, that's, again, it's going backwards, which again has to be cubic Beziers. Okay, so that's kind of neat. Also, the third link I want to show you is this one here, is a pretty famous link called cubicbezier.com. This is where you can actually make your own curves. So let's say you just take some of these handles and you want to make it, you know, let's see if we can try to make it do something weird. Right? And then press go. So this one here, the pink one on the top, that's me. The one at the bottom, that's this default one, the ease. But so it gives me a sense of what my animation will look like when before I actually use it. And let's say I like this animation. What I can do is I can just copy this code and put it in my thing. So let's try. Let me go back to my code pen. Here, this one. Let's try it out. So instead of 2 seconds of transform of 2 seconds of ease, okay, that's the default, right? If I just say transition 2 seconds, except I was more specific here. Instead of ease, you can replace any timing function with cubic Bezier. Boom. Let's see how it works now. Click. Click. There you go. And that's how you make your own functions. So keep that in mind. This is where you basically experiment with your own curves. And then the fourth and final property . And the fourth and final property, and this is where you get to play with this, is transition delay. So suppose, for example, you hover over a button, but you don't actually want the effect to play right away. Perhaps this is where the delay can come in. You could say something like 2 second delay, and your animation will only begin after 2 seconds. This is good for a staggering effect. So some websites, you've probably seen some websites where the menu, the nav menu, is a vertical menu, and they, instead of all the options of the menu coming in at the same time, they kind of stagger. So it's like a nice step effect. You could do that. So yeah, transition delay is the another optional property that is the number of milliseconds or seconds to delay the change before firing it. The default is set to 0. So here is what I'm going to ask you to do for the next, I don't know, 5 minutes. I've actually coded something here, and I've recorded myself. And this is what I want you to try to emulate. Here we go. There, that's it. Let me do it again. Notice how all of the menus are being staggered. Okay, so I'm going to give you the code pen for this, and you try to emulate that. So if you open up my slides, open up this link called Exercise Stagger the Menu Items. Okay, so right now, I've made it so that if you hover over anywhere in the body, if you hover anywhere in the body, the menu will appear. Okay, so now it's your job to try to fill in all of these different nth child 1, nth child 2, and so on with the transition statement to make that staggered effect. All right, cool. You got 5 minutes, 7 minutes, several minutes, and we'll take it up. Try it out. Keep in mind there are probably better ways to do this through JavaScript, but we're going to force ourselves to use CSS for this. Anyone get it? Yeah, awesome. Let me ask you how to do it. So let's take it up. So what'd you put here for number 1, where it says in my comments add a transition statement? What'd you put there? Yeah. Okay. So let's be more specific. Let's say transform 1 second, something like that. Oh, you said? Okay. Did you put any kind of ease something here or no? No. Okay, we'll just say ease out for now. For number 2, for nth child number 1, what'd you say here? Again, sorry. 1 of a second. Okay. So the delay is 250 milliseconds. Right. Oh, you said? Okay. I'm going to say only because I said here 250 milliseconds, just because that's the exact value that I use. I'm just going to make it look what the YouTube video looked like. But yeah, you're right. You can put it anything you want. And so if I hover over just the, right now, the home, the first one, which is all I affected, is delayed. So that means the next one, what'd you put for this one? Yours, anyway. Yeah, exactly. So that's the lesson, is that if you're using the staggered effect, you have to basically add the previous ones in order to make it look staggered. So basically all of these ones are going to look the same, except you just add the equivalent value to each one. So if I just add 250 one of these, so 1,000, 1,250, 100, and 1,750. That should give you that staggered look. Okay, cool. Very good. Next, so to sum it up, these are your 4 properties that you'll ever need to use for transition. Transition property, where again, you want to be more specific and not use all. Transition duration, where you can use seconds or milliseconds. Keep in mind, milliseconds is used in production. Timing function, where you can use some of the presets or make your own through the cubic Bezier. And transition delay, which by default is 0 seconds. So obviously from last week when I said just put transition 2 seconds, the only required property is the transition duration. The others are optional because they all have defaults. Okay. So this slide here is the longhand notation. This slide here is the shorthand notation of the exact same thing. I'm going to get you to try an experiment though. And the question is this. Does it have to be in this order where you have the transition property, the duration, the timing function, the delay? Does it have to be in that order? And here I gave you a link to CodePen, and I want you to experiment by shuffling these values around and see if it's the same effect or not. So here, right now, if I hover over this about us, it makes that link green, background color green, in 0.7 seconds with a delay of 0.2 seconds. The next few minutes, try shuffling around these different properties and see if there's one rule or if there's no rules. I want you to discover that. Go.
CodePen just be about us.
What was that?
The code just be about us. Oh, right now? Okay.
With the way the about us animates,
Yes.
If you jumble the properties around in different order, will that animate the same way? Or is there one rule that you have to be in a certain order in order to animate the same way, because otherwise it might mess it up. And that's what I'm trying to get you just to discover. I'm going to give you a hint. The question is, with regards to the seconds, does that have to be in a certain order? Or can one come before the other? Anyone get it? Yeah. Yes, exactly. Okay, so the answer is the properties in general don't matter. You could jumble these properties around, it will still work the same. However, the only rule is if you have two values or two values in terms of seconds, the second one is always the delay. The first one will always be interpreted as the duration. Okay? And the reason why I said that is because the quiz, when I inherited this course, it said this transition statement must be in the certain order, but it turns out to be not true. Okay? So I changed that quiz question. All right. Let's go on. So next slide, this is your chance to make the ball move realistically. Actually, I think I showed it to you already, but you get to play with this now. So here, I don't give you any code. I give you pseudocode here, or instructions on what to do, and you have to make this work. All right, using active. All right, so I'll give you 5 minutes to do this. Make the ball move smooth and realistically. I'll give you 5 minutes for that. And we'll take it up after 5 minutes. All right. Anyone get it? I think the hardest part is the selectors, actually, the CSS selectors. So let's try this. Number one, make the paw move 50 pixels or whatever pixels upon click, use active. I think this is the hardest part, is using the CSS selector. Now, the way I've structured my HTML is I just have 2 image tags. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to target the paw. So if the paw is clicked, then target the following image, right? Because I have, in the first image, I have paw of the class. In the second image, I have a ball, ball of the class. So if the paw is being clicked upon, I really want to target the ball with the following stuff. I want the ball to move. 200 pixels or so. Okay, so let's see what that does. Click, click. Okay. So it's moving. Good. Number two, make above animation smooth, which means I need a transition. So in my ball CSS, let's put a transition. And instead of saying all, I'm going to be more specific. And so what am I doing? I'm modifying the transform properties. So therefore, I'll put that keyword here, transform. And let's make it 1 second or 1,000 milliseconds. Let's have an ease out, so it's really fast at the beginning and kind of slows down at the end as gravity and friction take over. And I also said here for number 4, let's have a slight delay as well. So let's put it like a 200 millisecond delay so that the ball doesn't move right away. It kind of waits for the paw to really hit it. So let's see what happens now. Now the paw isn't quite moving as I expected, but the ball is moving. So let's make that paw move. There it is. So let's make the paw move. Oh, this is my number 1. Paw, active, transform, translate x 50 pixels. That's what I meant to say. That's what I meant to do for number 1. Now if I go boop, okay. Now the paw itself is just a jump cut. I need to smooth that. So in the root paw, which is up here, let's put a transition. And we are affecting the transform property. Let's make it 2.25, let's say 250 milliseconds, just to be consistent. We'll have an ease in. Let's try that. So now the paw is moving. Okay. Now this is where, okay, it is moving realistically in terms of the x-axis, but what property might I want to make it look more realistic? I think I said it here. I want it to rotate. And this is where the multiple properties come in. So right now we've been just handling one property. There are 2 ways to do multiple transforms. The slide I have in front of you it's considered the wrong way, even though you can do it. And then I'm going to show you the right way in the next slide. So the quote unquote wrong way to do it is to place all the different properties like this, where you have affecting the first property here, comma, second property here, and so on. The problem with this style is that each of these subsequent properties has to match the columns. So if the first one has no delay, so if color has no delay, you have to put a 0. So you can imagine how frustrating that'll be if you have like 4 or 5 different properties and you kind of like have to play match for all these different lines. It could be a headache. So that's how why it's considered the wrong way. The right way to use multiple transforms is to have each property on its separate line. So this slide is equivalent to the last slide, except you're just putting the property, the duration, all in one line, separated by a comma. Then you have the second property, duration, delay if needed, and that's how you do it. So let's try that with the ball. I want it to rotate. So where's the ball here? Here it is. I want this ball to rotate. Oh, wait, I can't put it. Okay, question, can I do this? No. Answer, it has to have one transform, otherwise I'm just rewriting CSS rules, overwriting, cascading rules. So I want to say rotate. I could say, 360 degrees, or just to let you know, you can try other units, right? Like one turn, that should work too. So let's try this. All I said was rotate one turn in addition to moving it. There it is. Cool, eh? Now let's just, out of curiosity, what if I said, instead of one turn, I said 2 turns? So not quite as realistic. So just be aware of that. Right? Okay, so now that I put in another property, how is my transition going to look now? Because I'm using multiple properties. So here, I'm going to try the new style. I'm going to say, okay, that is my first one, comma, and my second one is, what was it again? Oh, wait, hold on. This doesn't count. Never mind. But you got the idea. I had one transform there already. Cool. Here's the code pen exercise I wanted you to use. Okay, so try this. This is where you can actually use multiple transitions because I want you to, here's what it looks like. So right now, if you hover over the button, it just jump cuts. And there's 2 property changes. There's a color change and there's a scaling change. So there's a transform change and there's a background color change. There's 2 properties involved. So I want you to try it out. Open the code pen. And I put instructions here somewhere. No, here, number 1 through 5. So add a longhand transition to make the scaling smooth upon hover, then change it to the shorthand notation. That's just so you get experience between longhand and shorthand. And then what I want you to do is try this. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go code this along with you. Because I see here number 3 where you have to inspect, and let me show you that. Okay, so let's add a longhand transition to make this look nice and smooth. So, and what I noticed for a few of your in-class exercises or labs, when I said last week, make it smooth, and it wasn't smooth, it's because you forgot to put the transition in the root DOM base element of the thing, okay? Yeah, you could put the transition here on the pseudo class, but that'll only make the pseudo class smooth. But as soon as you take off your mouse upon the hover, it'll jump cut right back. So if you want it to be smooth both ways, you have to put it on the root base element kind of thing. So here I say transition, and I said here for number 1, try the longhand style. So okay, we'll try longhand. So transition property will focus on the background color this time. And maybe just 2 seconds, 1,000 milliseconds, and we'll just use the defaults of, we'll change it. Let's see what that does if I hover. Oh, hold on. What's happening here? Did I spell it right, or am I not working? Oh wait, sorry. Because I'm using the longhand, I did this totally wrong. I thought this is the shorthand for some reason, just the way my mind works, which is okay. Here we go. So we want a semicolon there. Is that what you were about to say, Vivian? Oh, zoom in. Sorry. Okay. So let's try the longhand way. So transition property is background color. Transition duration is 2,000 milliseconds, semicolon. Transition timing function is ease out, and there's no delay. So let's see if that works. And it does. The color indeed now. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering this background that I'm using, I found this cool thing. If you ever Google particles.js, you get to this website, which I came across, which was kind of neat. And so this guy just made this particles.js. So I just included that just to make it look kind of cool. That's all. Okay, next, let's change number 2. Change it to the shorthand notation. Okay, so instead of this, I'm going to comment all this out. Oh, hold on. I want to also, oh no, we'll do that later. Okay, let's change this to a shorthand notation. So shorthand is transition, background color, 2,000 milliseconds, ease out. And it should do exactly the same thing in terms of color only. I still have not affected the scaling yet. However, number 3, this is why I want to do this with you, where I say inspect the button and change the cubic Bezier handles. Check this out. For anything that's animating, Because I said here ease out initially, I can actually see that in my dev tool. So if I right click this button, click on inspect, look for that easing that I had. There it is right here. Ease out. I want you to click on this square and see what happens. If you're using Firefox, it should be similar. So click on the square. Ta-da! You have your own cubic Bezier right in the dev tool. So you don't have to necessarily go to cubicbezier.com to experiment. You could just do it here. And Firefox has the same kind of thing. So you could just change that up to whatever you want and enter. And notice now, it's now changed from ease out to cubic Bezier. So I'm going to copy this if I like it. Close my dev tools, and I'm going to replace my ease out with what I just copied. And now the color should change. Although I guess the color, the cubic Bezier is working, but I guess the color change isn't the best. Maybe the scaling will work better. Number 4, additionally include the color change. So now let's additionally include the scaling change. All right, so this is where we're going to use the multiple properties. So here is where we're going to say, okay, background color, that's the first one. Instead of semicolon at the end, I'm just going to put a comma. Now I can put in the other properties like transform, and we'll do that for 1,000 milliseconds. The cool thing about having multiple properties here is that you can have different values. You don't have to necessarily use the same one. Okay, so I'm using a different duration. I'm using a different timing function. Let me add a little bit of delay. Well, then semicolon. So now everything is smooth. Okay, so that's how you use multiple transforms if you should need it. Cool. So basically, CSS transitions are good when you want a single fire shot. So if you want to only animate something once. Number 2, CSS transitions are great for granularity if you want to animate 1 or 2 properties in a given state. Also bulletproof. If transitions aren't supported by the browser, the change happens anyway. It's just a jump cut. And 4th, timings. You can control the animation timing for transition property. Let's see here. Let's see. So what do we have here? Okay, so this is your in-class exercise 4, which I'll give you time to do right now. So what I want you to do is recreate the tree frog's rocket timing function. So again, if you go back to treefrog.ca, I want you to recreate this rocket going up in a very similar manner. Okay, so I want to see that acceleration. I want to see that bounce as it lands as well. And I've given you the code pen here to start off with, and this is what you'll submit to me in Blackboard. So I've given you here this, and you just fill in the rest to make it happen. Okay, so I'm going to give you time right now, 15 minutes or so, and break right after that for another 15 minutes, and I'll meet you on the other side.
The world goes upside down 3 times in 1 day.
Has anyone ever tried bun on the run here? No, today's their first day open. You can buy your lunch right here. Student made food. Yeah, they take debit. Hey.
Last week,
Yeah.
I did the portion with the SVG to
Oh,
the best of
Yeah.
my ability.
Yes.
Doesn't look very natural.
Okay.
It doesn't look realistic.
Okay.
I kind of like tried to use skew to like make it
Yeah.
wiggle one way
Right.
and
Okay.
then disappear.
Okay.
Doesn't have to look realistic. I didn't want to like put too much time into it, but I was like, oh, I won't submit again in case.
Yeah.
Did you see with the, I didn't check the marks, but did you see with the lab that I submitted it twice or the in class?
I only saw the second one. I never saw the first one, oddly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good. So it was done with hover.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I realized it last second when I started looking over the lab
Yeah.
and then in class, so
Yeah.
I just resubmitted it and changed
Okay,
it.
cool.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Albert.
No problem.
Howard, in this example you gave us, you have a transition for the button already. Is it not working? Because right now you already have the button here. I'm guessing that.
That was it.
Can it come out?
You can change that. How do we?
Doesn't do anything.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's a good question. You can change that.
I don't, I mean, if that's where we're supposed to put something in. I want to, I just thought they're like, okay, it's gonna conflict if I put it on the hover.
Yeah, you're supposed to put the transition statement there. Now, if you look at tree frog, let me put that on the YouTube video. Good question. So if you look at treefrog.ca, if you hover, there is a color change, right? So yeah, now in my code that I gave you, I think I already put a transition statement on the button. Please either remove that or edit it to your liking, because I think that was for another thought process. Yeah. Or in the base class. Remember how I said put the transitions in the base class instead of the hover? That was the base class? Okay, then leave it there. Yes, so you have to make a change in the hover.
We'll wait for Matt. Okay.
Line code pen link, yeah.
Yeah, or does he get a monkey? Is monkey and a tiger? You guys never seen that movie? Wait. Yeah, I remember. He's like the video game coder, and he like just gets hired and lives with his grandma, and then he has to like go to work and like all his coworkers. He's like, yeah, he's like, Chip kept me up all night. He comes in like, alright on his hand. Yeah. And then Dante. Yeah, it might be something else. There's a game consultant that gets brought on into a girl that begins like having a relationship with her. And then her drug dealer for weed is this guy named Dante, and like he's like super out there. And he's like he's just like a tiger, no, a lion or something. He's just like monkey, right? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, oh man, no, I'm gonna get a lion. Maybe it's reverse order. You're the man, they get high, play video games, monkey, but the TV's not even online. And like, yeah, it's a good movie. It's a good movie. It's a really good movie.
Apparently he was like out buying a car or whatever. His car guy was. Oh yeah, he was getting one.
Pretty good around. Really hard. And then I was like, Yeah, like 30 minutes, something like that. I'm not sure. No, we just moved it. Yeah, take a little like high average of it. Yeah, that's just. So 30 minutes.
Man. 48 seconds to go.
Oh.
All right. Little commercial break, some links that I saw that you might interest you. First one that I saw in Twitter is this one right here, 2019 HackerRank Developer Skills Report. This comes out every year. It's always good to see these kinds of reports to see what's trending so that you can decide what to invest in terms of what to learn. Let's see here. Look at this, React poised to overtake AngularJS in 2019. Frameworks developers want to learn in 2019, the highest being React. Frameworks hiring managers want versus frameworks developers know. So here, hiring managers want people who know React, AngularJS. Where's Vue? Vue's right here. That's what I'm pulling for. Anyways, yeah, so just go through that and see what interests you and maybe gives you some insight into the industry that you are preparing for. Second link that I saw this past week was this interesting article called The Great Divide. And it starts off with this quote, 2 front-end developers are sitting at a bar. They have nothing to talk about. And this is apparently is a growing concern in the front-end industry. Basically, it's an article that says the title of front-end developer is so vague because on one hand, you could just know HTML, CSS, and on the other hand, you need to know like all this JavaScript framework stuff. And so those are the two opposing worldviews within the front-end developer world, and it's affecting each other's relationships when they're trying to work with each other. So it's just something to be aware of. And then I saw this one funny cartoon, which is totally on point from what I see today. It's like this. I'll let you read it yourself. Right? Right? Totally relate to that. Okay, let's get on to this one. Okay, so here again are the different preset timing functions that you already know. Linear, ease in, ease out, cubic Bezier. However, this one here, this is different from the others. I don't know if you remember that Sesame Street a long time ago. They had like one of these things was not like the other. Remember that? This is it. Steps is like the same, yet it's totally different from the others. This is the basis of what sprite animation uses. So why sprites? Let's go back to think of back in the days of flipbooks. Maybe you've created a flipbook yourself. This is what we're talking about here. This is back to the traditional frame by frame animation drawn by hand. Okay, so sprite animation enables you to break up the animation into different frames rather than the usual interpolated tween motion that we're used to. So instead of the browser that automatically interpolates the two states from the from state to the to state, rather, if you use, instead of saying linear or ease, if you rather use steps, that can take your PNG file, for example, and it's going to move a whole bunch of pixels, 100 pixels, then 200 pixels, then 300, and it's sort of like the flipbooks. And here's the question: which principle of animation does this remind you of back in week 1? Answer: the straight ahead and pose to pose. So the steps is a lot like the pose to pose one, or maybe it's sort of like the straight ahead. It's sort of like in between, where it's not quite as smooth, where of the the ease and the linears, it's not that smooth, but it's more jerky, but it's fast enough to trick your eye and trick your brain to think it's animating, right? So here's a quote by Val Head. Sprite animations are best for small animated embellishments in web interfaces. Typically, these animations will be created first in animation software, like After Effects, or even drawn frame by frame in something like Illustrator. So I won't be going over how to make these sprite images in Adobe Illustrator, for example, but I will be showing you what to do with them once they're created. So here are just a few tips if you happen to be exporting images from your software. Number one, when you're exporting a sprite, Adobe Illustrator and similar programs have an export frames to images function. And just so you know what we're talking about here, I have a link on example sprites. So if I click on this link right now, this is an example image of what you could create in Illustrator, for example, and it's a sprite animation. And so what's going to eventually happen is, notice how each of these rows is Super Mario doing a slightly different movement. And so what steps will do is it'll move from frame to frame to frame, just like a flipbook. Okay. Number 2 tip is use high quality images for your setting, but beware of the file size. So basically, there's a balancing game. You can make your animation smooth by adding in more frames, but the cost is your file size. So it's a balancing game. Number 3, don't export progressive JPEGs. So just don't use the progressive setting. And number 4, smooth animation. Oh, that's what I just said. Smooth animation versus file size. If you want to make your animation smooth, then create more frames, but it's going to come at the cost of a larger file size. So, yeah. So here is a visual of how steps works. And again, it's just like a flipbook. This steps function is where you basically say steps bracket and then you insert a number. And that number represents the number of frames in your PNG file, for example. So basically, steps acts as a timing function, just like ease or linear, that splits a block of keyframes into x equal steps. And then it jump cuts between them real fast, depending on how fast you want it. In the past, where we used a traditional ease, for example, where you'd start, at the first state, and then it would gradually the browser would gradually interpolate everything to the final state. The steps jump cuts really quickly, okay? And it cycles through each snapshot or frame, and it pauses on each based on how many steps you divided your total duration into. So instead of one continuous motion, your animation is divided into a series of holds but if it's fast enough, your brain thinks it's all one smooth animation, right? So here's an example of linear. So the green box, I used a linear timing, okay? And the blue box, I used a steps timing. So you don't have to use a PNG file for sprite. You can still use things like changing colors and that kind of thing, or in this case, moving the element. So if I click on this green box, because if it's active or it's going to move, right? If I click on it, click. As you can see, it moves in a linear fashion because that's what I set up here, linear. Now, watch what happens when I click on the blue one. Click. It still moves 300 pixels to the right, but notice how it divides itself up into this number of frames, 3 frames in this case, okay? So in 3 seconds, it's just going to that position, but the browser automatically divides it into 3 frames. So it's kind of like linear, but instead of many interpolations between, it's just a few pose-to-pose frames, okay? That's cool. You need to know. There's actually an optional second parameter where it can accept 2 possible values. It could either have start, which is by default, or it could have a value of end. So let me demonstrate before I explain this. Or you could try it on your laptop. I want you to try to click on your laptop, click on this one, and you tell me what is the difference. Or maybe I'll just demonstrate it right now. So let me click on this one, and I want you to observe if what is the difference. There is a difference. So here we go. Click. Oh, sorry. Here we go. Click. Let go. Click. Let go. Did you see the difference? What was that? Yours doesn't work? You have to hold it. You have to hold it. Yeah, because it's active, right? So it's using active. You have to hold it. Yeah, so click and hold. Click and hold. Yeah, click and hold. So, so here's the hint. The question is, when does each block start to move upon click? So let's try this one again. So I'm going to say click and watch when it moves. Click, it moves right away, right? Let me try this one. Click, it doesn't move right away, right? So the start basically tells the animation to move immediately when you hear the mouse click. And the end tells the animation to move after 1 frame. In this case, it's 1 second because you have 3 frames divided into 3 seconds, which is 1 second, right? So if this slider that I put here represents 1 second, right? Then if I click 1, that's why it moves. But then for this one, this is another second, and the blue square moves at this point, right? 1, 2, right? That kind of thing. Okay, here's another thing. Another example of using steps. Here, the default background color is green, but notice if I hover it, it should change to yellow. So in 3 seconds, it's going to divide that into 3 frames. So as I hover, it's going to turn into yellow, but because of the steps function, it's going to divide that transition into 3 equal parts. Let's check it out. Ready? Hover. Okay, cool. All right, next example. So here, we have a background image. Let me show you what the background image looks like in its entirety. I have a link here. This is what the background image looks like. It's a typical sprite background image. Right now, if you look carefully, I say here 0 pixels, 0 pixels, which represents which corner? Top left, right here. So that means in my image, we're focusing on this area right here. And what I'm saying in my hover is when I hover, I want to move the y-axis down by 300 pixels. So what's going to happen is it's going to move from this corner all the way to this corner, but it's going to divide it into different equal frames. So probably, I think it's going to divide it. You're going to see this part of the frame first, then you're going to see like this part of the frame first, and then next is like just book it, and then finally is the trees. So let's see that in action, and this was a hover, so let me hover over it right now. Hover. So as you can see, it's going down because we said minus 300 pixels on the y-axis for the background position. Container. I just say what is my HTML code here? All I said here, what did I say? I just had a div. Yeah. Yes, my height is 100. Yeah. Okay. What else did I want to say about that? Nothing. Okay. So, Twitter. Let me show you my Twitter account before I go into the slide. Let me show you my Twitter account, and I want you to observe how Twitter uses sprite animation. So here's my Twitter account. Let me like something. I'm going to magnify this post right here, and I'm going to like this in a second. But first, I want to magnify it so you can see the animation of this heart. How far can I magnify this? Whew. Okay. Whew. All right, here we go. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna click on the like in 3, 2, 1. Let me do it again. So unlike it and like it again. A couple times. One more time. Okay. This is what you are going to recreate for your lab. Let's inspect this. Right-click this, inspect it. And notice here they have a background image, and this, they have a URL to a PNG file. I've given you that PNG file, and it looks like this link here. So let's open that up. That is their PNG file. So yeah, so there's a few questions you need to ask yourself when you're doing sprite animation. Question number 1, how many frames are we dealing with? And whatever answer you come up with, that's usually the number you want inside your steps function. So when you say steps bracket x, close bracket, you want that x to usually match the number of frames. So in this case, how many? We start with this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. 29 frames. Keep that in mind. Second question you want to ask yourself, how big are each frame? So let me open that image again. Sometimes to find out, I just like to open the image and just hover over the tab, and it'll tell me right there, 2900 by 100. So 2900, that's the length. 100 is the height. So the last question is, that's how long the entire image is. How big is each frame? Well, if there's 29 frames and there's 2900 pixels, that means the length of each frame will be 100 pixels, right? Okay. So you'll need to remember those numbers when you code it out. Right, so 2900 pixels divided by 29 frames is 100 pixels. So in my slide, I have set that PNG file here as a background inside my div, set at 0, 0. I also connected it using a slider so that each time I slide, it moves exactly by 100 pixels. Okay. And you can see also the number. I've also coded it so that this number changes as well every time I slide it. Okay. Now, so here's the 0 at this point. So the next one, if I move it 1 frame, boom, that's 100 pixels, right? Next frame, 100 pixels, there. If I move it fast enough, it looks animated, right? So if I kind of go woo, woo, like back and forth real fast, it kind of looks like it's animated. Now, if you keep your eye on this first frame here alone and ignore the rest, it looks like just like the animation that you saw on Twitter. And to help you with that, That's why I made this button here, make width 100 pixels. So let me click on that so that everything else is hidden. So I have an overflow hidden used here, so you can't see the rest, but it's still there. So now if I drag the slider, right, it looks smooth, but in reality, if I do it slow enough, it's just one frame at a time. But if I do it fast enough, your mind plays a trick on you thinking it's moving, but in reality, it's not. Okay. All right. So using steps to move the background position. I think this is the same image. Yes. What am I saying here? If I click on it, it'll change the background position to 2800 pixels in 1 second. So notice here is I have the 28 frames, which matches the negative 2800 pixels, and it's going to change that in 1 second. So instead of me sliding it manually, if I click it and hold the click, it should do all of that automatically. Here I go. Click. Right. Let go of the click. Right. Okay. So that's what's happening with steps. It's just like the olden days of filmers. Who remembers back in elementary school watching a movie through one of these machines, like I did? Anyone? Is everyone so young now? You don't even remember this. Okay. So every once in a while, if the speed wasn't right, you'd see something like this. And I'm going to link to this Simpsons GIF right here, where the film kind of flickers, stutters. It's, there's something not right with the speed. You might encounter the same thing when you're debugging your steps. So here's an example. I'm using the same slide as a couple slides ago. Here, the only difference is I changed the number from 28 to 29. Everything else is the same. Now let's see what happens when I click it. Here we go. Click. Let go. So do you see that? It's giving that same kind of film flicker effect. So if you ever see this while you're using the steps functions, that means you're doing something wrong. There's a mismatch between the number of steps and the length. So now you know. Quote by Valhead. So in terms of speaking with sprite animation and steps in particular, she says, notice how each frame is shown with no transition or easing in between. It's just a hard jump cut and hold to the next frame. The continuity of this animation is a result of how closely each frame is drawn from the one before it, and the tendency of our eyes and brain to want to make things appear to be moving smoothly. It's a pretty. So before we do that, before we close it off with the final quiz and lab, let's play Kahoot. Okay. Oops. This one instead. All right, where are my stuff? Where is there you go. CSS. All right, so there's 8 questions. Classic. Yes. And I got my stickers all ready for you. So this is good. So here we go. Join kahoot.it with the game pin of so-and-so. Are on the line. Remember, and I'll keep the same rules. So first place gets 3. Second place gets 2. First place gets 1. Or what did I just reverse it? First place gets 3. Second place gets 2. Third place gets 1. Yeah. How are you expecting? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11. Expect 11. We got 8 so far. Three more to wait. All right, 10 more seconds. 10. Got 9, 8, 7, 5, 4, 3, 2. Wait, okay, all right. I was hoping someone would say wait if they really wanted to play. There we go. I think we got. Oh, is there? I think we're missing one, unless you're playing together or someone. I don't know. Okay, here we go. Ready? Unless you want to say wait, whoever you are. Okay, here we go. 8 questions. What is the transition property of transition 2 seconds? And you get more points if you answer first. All is correct. Here we go, right? So transition 2 seconds, the default is all. Yeah, ease, by the way, is not a transition property. It's a transition timing function. Here we go, next one. Oh, nice, Vivian. Followed by Andy, followed by Matt. Here we go. What should the transition property be in this statement? Answer is transform, actually. Transform. I tricked you. I didn't even trick you. It's so remember what I said? If you're using transition property, you're looking at what are you changing, and it's not this on the right-hand side. It's always on the left-hand side. Transform. Okay. Yeah. What else was it? Transform. One said ease. Yeah, ease is not a transition property. That's a transition timing function. Okay, here we go. Nice, Vivian. Nice, Andre and Andy. Here we go. What's the magic millisecond number that is considered the sweet spot? Nice, that was easy. There's a few easy questions here, so that's good. Vivian, yep, same, good. Which easing has the classic deceleration curve? Well, it's either ease in or ease out. It's ease out. So I think of this as it slows on the outer end kind of thing. So we got, okay, good, same thing. Okay, here we go. What is the transition delay? It's 1 second. Remember, I purposely did it out of order except for this one. So the second value of seconds is always refers to the delay. This first one always refers to the duration. All right, here we go. Same, nice. Okay, here we go. Which transition timing function is used for sprite animation? Come on. Right, easy. And the last question. Oh, second last question. The steps function represents the number of. Another easy one. Frames, pixels. Same, okay, here we go, last one. I didn't even talk about this one today. But I keep on mentioning it almost every class. Transform and opacity, right? So there's a lot you can do with transform and opacity. So if possible, try to use those two only for performance reasons, because the other ones will slow the browser down. Let's see who the winners are. Whoa, third place. Whose daughter do you have? Are you? Who's that? You came from behind. All right, so Vivian, you get 3 stickers. Andre, you get 2, and Zach, you get 1. Congratulations. Come on up and claim your prize. That's funny. So I'll just give you a few moments. So after everyone sits down, I'll talk about this lab. Basically, you have the remainder of class to do the quiz and to do the lab. So I'll talk about that in a second. Actually, while we're waiting, I could go over my commercial break links here. So this is a cool reference link. It's called cssreference.io transition. So if you check it out, it has all kinds of things about CSS you'd like that you might want to know. It's just a nice encyclopedia of all the different properties that you'd like to or try to remember. Okay. The second cool thing that I saw last year that I kept for this year is this page here. Great UI UX animations. This is like your inspirational page. Every so often, I'll come across a page that I'll just bookmark, and I'll put it under my folder up here called Good Design. And it's just like inspirational. It's like, yes, this is good animation. This is good, you know, just good animation, good design. So check that out, get inspired. Keep that under your good design folder. And then this last one here is just a cool tool if you ever need some background patterns. Like, I think I mentioned this to Vivian earlier on. It's called Hero Patterns. It's just SVG patterns that you can just include if you like it. Click on it, and then here's your code that you just copy and paste. So, backgrounds. Okay. So from now until the end class, you'll do the quiz plus lab 4. Let me demonstrate lab 4. It's essentially the same thing that I showed with a Twitter, except you're actually doing it in a local file. Now, I do have it in CodePen, but do not submit your CodePen link for your lab. Otherwise, it's a mark of 0. So submit rather a local file, which I have given you in Blackboard already, of the same thing. So I've given you the skeleton code. All you have to do is animate this Twitter like button, okay? So I put here your different steps, step 1, step 2, step 3. And also notice I use a target here, which is another form to get the click event that uses a combination of the hashtag within here. So basically, when you click it, it looks exactly like the Twitter thing, the real Twitter like. When you click on the like button, it animates exactly as is. So I already demonstrated that to you earlier on. It's pretty much the same thing. So submit that to me locally. Again, I've given you that local file in Blackboard under week, where are we? We're in week, what now? E-learning, week 4, lab 4. There, I've given you twitter.zip. So twitter.zip is exactly everything you see here in this code pen. So you modify that, submit that to me in Blackboard, and you're good to go for lab 4. If you have time, maybe read this CSS transition article. You can even look at Scott McCrindle's old YouTube video on how he taught this CSS transition for a point of comparison. And that is pretty much it. So you now have the end of class to work on your quiz and your lab 4. I'll be here for questions if you need me. Any questions, comments? And the YouTube now. Yeah, give me